Hi there and welcome back. We ended our last video, A Courtroom Without a Judge, the Paris Agreement Trap, with our Manifesto for a Global Climate Authority, or GCA, a shared court for a shared planet. In this video we dive into the question of hard law. We'll explore the existing enforcement mechanisms under the law of the sea and the law of the earth, and respond to two questions. 1. How far are these established rules from the failing soft law? The second, are our seas and lands truly protected, or is this where we find the next systemic crisis? Let's take a closer look and get the answers. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, is often called the Constitution of the Oceans. It defines who controls what, from coastal waters to the deep seabed, and it creates duties, not just promises. It's one of the few examples of true hard law in environmental governance, binding, enforceable, and global in scope. It even comes with a real courtroom, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. But despite the legal power, ocean ecosystems continue to collapse. So, does law alone guarantee protection, or just the appearance of it? For our Global Climate Authority, GCA, the law of the sea is the perfect blueprint, a pre-existing legal framework to enforce global rules beyond the immediate right to self-rule. Even the law of the sea has its own trap. While the high seas are governed globally, nations keep absolute control over their exclusive economic zones, 200 nautical miles from shore. This is the sovereignty blockade at sea. The blue economy's promise of sustainability often gives way to exploitation, industrial overfishing, seabed dredging, and resource depletion that devastate marine ecosystems. The greatest tragedy is that the ocean has no voice. It exists only to be used, often beyond repair. Nations with stronger fleets, after exhausting their own waters, move into weaker neighbor zones without consequence. That's why the Global Climate Authority must rise to give the environment a voice and say enough is enough. Because even UNCLOS cannot stop these abuses. We have the hard law manual, yet we still crash against the same wall, national sovereignty. Unlike the law of the sea, there is no single law of the earth. This is the ultimate barrier, national sovereignty. Land use within borders remains governed by the absolute right to self-rule, regardless of global consequences. More than 150 countries now recognize the right to a healthy environment, yet recognition is not enforcement. In practice, these laws often prioritize resource extraction, mining, industrial agriculture, or drilling, over global climate stability. And crucially, the entire global soft law architecture, from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to the Paris Agreement, holds no legal authority to challenge those sovereign land use decisions. Despite all the commitments, pledges, and signatures, we can plead, but we cannot enforce. And that's precisely why the Global Climate Authority must exist, to give the planet a law with voice, not goodwill alone. Forests and land may belong to nations, but their ecological value belongs to all of us. When a state authorizes deforestation or oil extraction, it acts within its rights, yet against our collective survival. It is deeply concerning to witness the continued destruction of forests such as the Amazon, and the approval of new oil ventures. systematic, convenient, and emblematic of business as usual. The weakness of soft law, where local decisions prevail, has repeatedly undermined the spirit of the Paris Agreement, exposing its enforcement gap. Only a global climate authority, the GCA, can bridge this gap, transforming global commitments into binding planetary law that transcends national contradictions. The hard law versus the soft law. Two systems, one failure. Both frameworks reveal a paradox. Even where rules are binding, enforcement remains partial, and where cooperation is voluntary, global impact is devastating. The gap between the two defines the climate crisis itself. At sea, the rules are binding, yet often unenforced. On land, the rules are voluntary and rarely fulfilled. Together, they show us that the problem is not the lack of law, but the lack of authority. Both the law of the sea and the law of the earth reveal one truth: enforcement stops where sovereignty begins, and that is precisely the space where the Global Climate Authority must emerge. What if there was a bridge between the voluntary and the binding, between goodwill and accountability? The Global Climate Authority is designed precisely for that space. Independent, science-guided, and free from national cycles, it would translate commitments into obligations and pledges into enforceable law. Despite decades of pledges and conventions, both land and sea protection remain far below what science and policy have agreed upon. Only around a sixth of the planet's land and less than one-tenth of its oceans are effectively protected, well below the 30% target set for 2030. Even where areas are officially declared protected, the reality is often quite different. Enforcement gaps, overlapping jurisdictions, and industrial activity within these very zones. Protection in name but not in practice. This failure is more than an ecological setback. It reveals a deeper crisis of governance. Our environmental agreements rely on goodwill, not legal force. And voluntary protection, however well-intentioned, cannot defend a shared planet. The true systemic crisis lies here, in the absence of a global climate voice authority, the voice of the planet itself, free from politics and profit. The failure of climate governance is not inevitable. It is structural. Our global institutions were built for cooperation, not enforcement. The Global Climate Authority, the GCA, would not replace nations, but reinforce them by creating a legal framework where environmental responsibility is shared, verified, and binding. A common court for a common planet, turning moral will into legal force and transforming promises into protection. The Global Climate Authority is not an institution of power, but of balance. It seeks to safeguard what no single nation can protect alone: the stability of the Earth system itself. In a century defined by interdependency, climate justice demands more than cooperation. It demands coherence. A global climate authority would give our planet what it has never had before: a law with voice and a voice with authority. Thanks for watching. Every system begins with a shared belief. And this one begins with ours. Let's keep looking for answers to what sovereignty truly means, or perhaps should mean, on land, at sea, and for the planet we share. See you in the next video. Bye!